I would not even be looking for a long-time partner until I was at least 28. And I feel like 28 is pretty, look at it for what it is. Most women marry a man between 6 and 7 years older than them. So that means you have to go down to like 18. Those guys that get married early, they never achieve what they should have achieved. And it doesn't work because he never becomes the man he could have. It is set up for failure. If I were you, I would do nothing but get jacked, get your money up, build yourself as a man, because women are just going to jump in front of you.
I tried to get through that the first time. I had to stop it a few times and take a few deep breaths. Thoughts on that?
So here's what I'll say about Justin. I think somebody broke Justin's heart early on, and he's been making women pay for it for a while now.
Without question.
Look, I'm a Christian, so I look at things through a biblical worldview, and so what I look as the responsibilities as masculinity, as a husband, as a father, is all informed by that. Justin has a very, very different outlook on life. I think we need to understand in part why a lot of young men are listening to that, though. And it's because they have been told for the past 2 decades at least that there's something fundamentally wrong with them because they do want to get jacked, to make money, to have a family, to do all these things. And then the first people to really push back against that narrative were guys like Justin. And by the way, I hold the church accountable for this. Because I cannot tell you how many times I look at and look, we have a good youth pastor at our church, but I'll see these youth pastors and I'll look at it like, dude, are you a man or are you a boy? And so when you have environments where young men can't seem to find the sort of men they want to be like within the church environment, with what we might call more of the traditional environments, well, then you don't blame them for finding someone else that actually exemplifies some of the characteristics that they'd like to see in themselves. The problem is then it goes down this direction, where it's, you need to be strong, you need to be successful, you need to be powerful. I agree with all of that. To what purpose? Oh, so you can get nice cars, so you can sleep with a lot of women, so you can do it. No, that's hollow. Not to mention the fact this whole idea of you got to wait till you're 28 to get married, to get established or whatnot. I don't think there's any biblical directive on what age you have to get married at, but I would advise people to consider this. You shouldn't get married until you are mature enough to get married. But I got married at 19.
Yeah.
What I always tell people is that if you have this attitude where it's, I'm going to live life and then I'm going to settle down and get married, dude, you don't know what marriage is about. And you are setting yourself up for failure. That advice sets you up for failure because you are looking at this as ideas, I'm going to build this, I'm going to add her to it. No, I wanted to build my life with my wife.
That's right.
And the other thing that was great about this is that my wife married me when I was just potential and not a lot.
Yeah.
Not a lot of potential, but she saw something in me.
Yeah.
We know what it is to have our power turned off because we can afford the electricity. We know what it is to deal with all of these things, to be poor, to be away from family, to have no support network, to have to lean into God and lean into each other for everything, to be able to go through war, through deployments, through you name it. Mm-hmm. We have been through it. And the most beautiful thing about that at the end of the day is we're doing better now, right? We've learned some things. We've grown professionally and in our relationship and everything else. If we lost it all tomorrow, I know she'd be there.
Yeah.
You see a lot of women on these shows now going, what do men want? And how do men feel love? I think one of the primary ways we feel love is loyalty. I mean, you hear a guy talk about a buddy of his. He might not even talk to that guy for 5 years, but if he's the guy that's on that list of people that if you called him at 2:00 in the morning and said, I need you here, he'd be there. That's how men feel love in friendship. Mm-hmm. When we feel the same thing about our wives, right? On top of all the other ways that we feel love with our wives, that's powerful. And it's unique to marriage. Yeah. And so I understand why people would admire the fact that Justin has been very financially successful. I understand why they would admire the fact that he's taking care of himself. He's in great shape. I understand all of that. What I would tell them is that if that isn't toward a purpose greater than your own hedonistic desires, the worst thing possible will happen to you. And that is one day you will have achieved all the things that you thought would bring you joy and peace and fulfillment. Yep. And you're going to find out that they didn't.
That's right.
And there's no greater depression. There's no greater letdown. The greatest letdown is not being in the gutter. The greatest letdown is achieving what you thought was the pinnacle and realize that you were wrong.
Because that right there is a path to loneliness.
Yes.
I could do a opposite of that and go, this is leading to loneliness. By the way, there's no data that I'm aware of that bears out what he said.
No.
In fact, the data shows that people that are married are more financially successful as a result of the companionship and the relationship. I think what's going on here too is, and I don't know him, so I'm not disparaging his character, but you can be ripped and you can be financially successful and still wildly immature.
Oh, yeah.
And very lonely. And I think this is clickbait for a lot of guys who don't want to grow up. And I'm telling you, there is a scourge of single young women in this country, mid-20s, late 20s, because dudes don't want to commit. And it's because of this kind of garbage. They want to get all of the benefits without, but you talked about loyalty and commitment. And I'll tell you another thing a man loves is to feel as though he is providing or protecting.
Oh, no doubt.
And you don't experience any of that with this bro culture.
It's true, but the only thing I'll push back on that is that if you look at the polling right now between young men and young women, young men are more conservative and more religious than they've been in the last 60 years.
Correct.
And young women are exactly the opposite. And so the reason why this is resonating is not just because guys want to be rich, jacked, and have a lot of women. The reason why it's resonating with a lot of other young men is because they feel like they've been told, they feel like they've been raised in a feminist culture that has constantly told them that they're the problem. They look around at their peers who are females and they feel like those women have bought into that as well. And the statistics bear out that most of them have. Not all of them.
Yeah.
Not all of them. Most of them have. And so while I will always be someone that says, men, you have a responsibility to lead. You must always first look inward on how do I become the sort of man that attracts, the sort of woman that, if you have this image of the sort of woman that you would like to marry, then you need to first ask yourself, am I worthy of that? And then you need to realize I am still to this day not worthy of my wife. And as long as I have that mindset, I'm constantly working to be worthy of her. So I think all of that's healthy. But I do think it has to be acknowledged that there has been a huge problem right now where young men have been starved for leadership.
I agree.
And unfortunately, I think he's wrong. I think he's leading him down a path that's going to cause a lot of loneliness. I think there's other men that have fully bought into the hedonistic view of the world, and they look at women as tools of their pleasure.
Correct.
And it's one of the most despicable, and least masculine thing that you can possibly do in my version of biblical masculinity.
I'm glad you pushed back on that, and I acknowledge that. And I'm also surrounded at Ramsey Solutions by a bunch of conservative, Bible-believing women. So mine is skewed. But I do see a lot of that, even in Christian circles. Dudes just don't want to commit, and that's a whole other subject.
Well, and part of it too is there's certain statistics that they listen to. Like for instance, they'll say that women initiate 70% of divorces. That's true. That is a verifiable fact.
Right.
They'll say that, okay, if a woman chooses to divorce you, you're going to have to pay her until she gets married again. Not until she shacks up with somebody else, but until she gets married again, and she can take your kids or use them as a tool in custody battles. The reason why this is resonating when young men hear it is because it's true.
Yep.
Now, here's the other thing I would say. And this is the part that just irritates me about looking at the world and viewing everybody through the lens of statistics. My wife and I got married at 19 and 20. Both of us, by the way, before I say this, I always got to caveat this. We have great relationships with our parents. We love our parents. We think they're wonderful parents. But we both grew up in homes that were considered broken homes, right? Divorce, multiple divorce. We got married at 19 and 20. We moved to the other side of the country where we had no support network with our family and no real friend network.
That's leave and cleave.
Right? Right? And we went into the military, which has a 50% or higher divorce rate during peacetime.
Wow.
Then a war kicked off, and I joined Special Forces, which has more of a 70 to 80% divorce rate. And people look like, oh my gosh, the odds. I'm like, those odds meant nothing to me. Why? Because of her.
Right.
Because of who I married.
Oh, I love that.
Because of what we built our marriage on.
Yeah.
Like those statistics mean nothing to me.
Numbers change when people do.
Yes. Yeah.
We don't think about that enough. Instead of looking at the stats, we go, I'm not going to be a stat.
The stats reflect what is currently happening.
Correct.
And we should ask good questions about why that's currently happening.
Yes.
It doesn't dictate what is going to happen.
Yes.
And that's the part too that I hate is this idea of telling young men, well, you can't look at the stats. You can't. No.
Yeah.
When men, and this is another thing too that I hammer down on all the time. I believe that God has put in a man, we have a biblical responsibility to lead. So lead. If you're waiting for the circumstances to change so that your leadership or the masculine traits that you want to develop will be properly respected within society, guess what? You're going to be real disappointed because you're the one that is actually going to change the conditions that you don't like. But you can change them for good or for worse.
Correct.
So you better understand, you better get that worldview together. And again, for me, that all goes back to, it's got to start with God. And then you build from there.
If you like this highlight, click here for the entire conversation.